Here's what happened. I was reminded earlier today of how much info is out there on the internet about burnout. I went to Google, I typed in the question, what is burnout? And I wanted to know how many search results, total search results, were going to come back. And how many do you think I got back? What do you think would be the best guess here for how that question of what is burnout on Google? All right, you ready for the amount of search results? You got your number? All right. Over 400 million results came back. 400 million. So I can get a few things from that. One, I can understand why someone is confused about burnout and how to avoid it. I can also understand how myths can pop up. And it makes more sense with the conversations I've had about burnout with these myths. So I want to get into it. This is Make Burnout Extinct. I'm Robert David Weeks. I want to get into 5 common myths that I could come up with that I have personally experienced, and I know others have as well. And I feel you're going to resonate with potentially all 5, if not at least one of these. These are 5 common myths about burnout and avoiding it. But before I get into these 5 common myths, I do want to say something to you, and that is thank you. Thank you for supporting this show, supporting this mission of Make Burnout Extinct. And if you haven't done it yet, please, after listening to this episode, share your rating and review. It helps to make the show the best show it can possibly be and to help continue to get the message out there to more people. But to think back to where this has gone, it's been now episode 30 that I'm recording right now. And I am mind blown by the amount of progress that's been made for this movement of Make Burnout Extinct. Without your support, this wouldn't be possible. So thank you. Now to get into the common myths. The first one I want to talk about is this one, that you have no control over avoiding burnout. It is that feeling of overwhelm, such an intense overwhelm, that you just want to throw your hands up in the air or bury your head in the sand and just ignore even potentially trying to avoid burnout. It's become so normalized that burnout is just a thing that's going to happen, where you just are inevitably going to hit it at some point in your life. And I can understand how that can happen. I mean, there's so much information out there on the internet about people's experiences with burnout, people venting, people just sharing how shitty their days are. But it's really important to remember that this is a myth. When it comes to you have no control over avoiding burnout, you got to remember burnout is something you experience. So therefore, your actions are going to determine if you hit burnout. And especially if the burnout beast, which we all have within us, drags you towards hitting burnout. And especially if it's something that you ignore, then the red flags, the signposts that tell you you're headed towards burnout. So it's not a moment to beat yourself up mentally with this, but it's just a reminder to tell you how much power you have in this. So that's myth number 1. Here we go for myth number 2. Once you make burnout extinct, you'll never have to deal with it again. I feel you already know this one, that this is a myth. It's that like quick fix, one and done fix solution. It feels like, yeah, it's that moment of, oh, just do this one thing and then it'll be gone forever. And it's not true. So a way to remember that this is a myth is to remember that every day you are on this burnout spectrum, where on one end you've hit burnout, and then on this other end you've made burnout extinct. And that spectrum, you get to decide where you land on this. I've talked about the spectrum before in the last episode, but I want to remind you about it in this one, because it's really important to recognize that every day we decide where we end up, and we decide if the burnout beast is going to drag us towards hitting burnout. So when that can come up, we can realize, okay, there is no permanent solution. You don't then get all of a sudden tired and overwhelmed and go through that mental chatter of beating yourself up. If, let's say, one day goes by and you're struggling and you feel you're headed towards burnout, you then you don't throw in the towel, but you just realize, oh, I got a new day tomorrow. So I'll get into that a little bit more for the reframe, but that one's myth number 2. Now let's move on to myth number 3. that burnout is a result of one area of your life. So we are complex people. We have so many different areas of life that can come up. We can have our, when it comes to our personal life, if it's our relationships with our partner, relationships with ourselves, or it's relationships with, kids, friends. We have so many different dynamics there. And I know you're someone that wants to help out everyone. You want to make sure everyone else is okay. And so I get it. And it's realizing that our relationships can have an influence on how we're feeling. I mean, those conversations where it can be exhausting to be in conversation. Maybe it's like, okay, you haven't taken out the trash past few days and you're having to have that conversation, or you're, realizing that, okay, I really have not been able to share how I'm truly feeling and things are bubbling up inside for comments that someone said in the past. I need to talk to them about it. So we feel what that stress and that anxiety. I've talked about it before in other episodes of like that feeds our burnout beast to hit chronic exhaustion. So if you can remember not just that area, but then other areas like our health and fitness also play a really big part, because if we are sitting or not moving a lot in our day, then all of a sudden we're not helping our mitochondria to become as efficient as they possibly can, or even creating more mitochondria, our energy, which creates our energy source for our body, the ATP. So we got to remember that this is interconnected. It isn't just work, because that has come up a lot on the internet and in conversation. People talk about that with work, of how, we're feeling burnt out from work. Well, you got to realize that the burnout sources are multiple areas of our lives. And then I'll get into the reframe here soon. So that's myth number 3. Now let's get into myth number 4, that burnout happens super quick without you realizing it. What comes up for me with this one is feeling like it's remembering that it's not an overnight situation. Like, it's not going to just be one night and then you've hit burnout. If you've not been at all fueling burnout, it isn't just a one night situation. You've got to remember that it's a slow burn towards burnout. The burnout beast is dragging you towards burnout, moving you through those red flags, which again, the 3 red flags are chronic exhaustion, negativity in your work that then seeps into your personal life and then your outlook on life overall, or the world overall. And then the third is terrible performance in your job or in your work. So it's a gradual drag. Like, you can think about that of like, yeah, I mean, it's like you're walking down this path. You're not flying down it on a high speed highway towards burnout. So that can help you in realizing that you have time to deal with this. So that's myth number 4. Myth number 5 is that it's complicated to avoid burnout. This one, this one comes up with a lot of messaging on the internet where you could be given, so many complexities to burnout. There's different types of burnout out there. There's all of a sudden a lot of terms that get thrown around when it comes to burnout. And I feel like it's gotten to this point where it's becoming this badge of honor to identify as a certain type of burnout, when I just want to tell you, let's get rid of the whole thing. Like, let's not even have burnout be a thing. There's been a normalization of it, which I feel it's tough. It's something I want to push back against, of thinking that this has to be normal in your day-to-day of you've experienced burnout. So I do want to remind you that it does not have to be complicated to avoid burnout. It can be simple to understand, to take in these terms, to take in these strategies, and figure out what the best strategy is for you. I want to remind you that we each have our own burnout-proof playbook. We do. We all do. Every single one of us has this ability of creating our own burnout-proof playbook, where it's specific plays, or, you think about it as these plays as strategies. I mean, it's the simple strategies, these simple tools. It's just a fancy way of saying that for these plays. I like it because I really like sports, specifically football. Big fan of the NFL. So that's how I take it, as like these plays in my playbook. But we all have that ability, and it feels like, for me, like nails on a chalkboard when I hear someone say that it's super complicated and to even think about what burnout is and how to avoid it. So that's myth number 5 that we're busting. Now what I want to do is share with you a reframe for each one of these. We can take a moment here. So actually, this would be a great time for you to, if you have a pen and paper, or you can take a moment to just think about it. Which one of these do you resonate with the most? Which one of these myths? Because I want to remind you that it's okay that you've had these myths come up, because I mean, there's so much information out there. I get it. And there's, especially with conversations you're having with friends maybe about it, I get that there is a lot of confusion as to what burnout is exactly. And then how do we avoid it? So I can get if one of these myths have been coming up for you, and I want you to just acknowledge that that's okay. It's not, you can honor the feelings that can come up, because I'm sure there's going to be some, some anger that comes up. You're going to be like, fuck, like, I can't believe I've been thinking about this as like this myth. Or you might have that like tough frustration or embarrassment or guilt or shame of like, man, I've been really having to like live life with this myth. But I want to remind you that you can change it. You have the ability right here to make a change. And I know that you have a lot going on, but this is your time, okay, to be able to do this. So which one out of all these do you resonate with the most? And if you resonate with all 5, also please send me a message. Either way, I'd like to know that for which one you resonate with the most. And out of all these 5, do you resonate with all of them? So to go to the first one, where it's the myth of you have no control over avoiding burnout, here's the reframe. Super simple. Don't got to make it complicated. You have control over avoiding burnout, because burnout happens to you. Therefore, your actions determine you hitting burnout. It's simple as that. Yes, we're going to have to deal with other people in the dynamics. Let's say if it's at work, coworkers, and the conversations that you're having with your coworkers that just feel exhausting, or with your boss or with clients, if it's your business or your employees. I get it that there are other people involved here that, you can't really control what they're going to say to you or the experiences that you have, but you can control how you show up to that and how you experience those situations. So that's really important to remember, because you play a part in that. So when it comes to someone pushing against your boundaries, you get to vocalize your boundaries and reset them, and be able to vocalize that rather than giving in. And all of a sudden now you're creating more stress for yourself. If that is taking on more responsibility at work when you really cannot take more responsibility at work, and you're not able to communicate that effectively, that's a moment for you to step into that and change the path of you being, instead of being dragged towards burnout, you can reverse direction through your actions. So that's a one way for the first myth. That's how you can reframe it. Now let's get into the second one. That, again, for the myth, to remind you, it's once you make burnout extinct, you'll never have to do anything again about it. The reframe is to remember that burnout prevention is an ongoing process. It requires regular attention. It's an everyday thing. You're on that spectrum. I know that could sound defeating, and I just want to remind you that by you stepping into this and moving towards who you want to become and focusing on getting unstuck and moving towards your vision in life, that's a win. Like, take a moment to just celebrate how awesome that is that you're doing that. Not a lot of people step into that. So I want to remind you of how powerful of a step that is, of an action that you're taking for your life and addressing burnout. Like, when you are being able to continue to move forward into who you want to become and focusing in on new habits, that then creates an increase of confidence within yourself, that trust that you can handle what's going to come your way. And what that then does for your life is it opens up doorways of possibilities, because you're raising the bar compared to other people in your life. You are raising it up to a next level. And with that can then come opportunities for you. So I don't want you to feel like pissed off about it, of like, oh, like shit, I got to deal with this every single day. It's more like, hell yeah, I got to deal with this every single day. And I get to decide every single day it's an opportunity to make burnout extinct my home for my life. Because let's say you have an off day, right? Let's frame it this way. Let's say you have an off day where it's a really intense and exhausting day. And let's say this project that you thought was only going to take you a few hours took you the whole entire day for work. What could happen then is you go through the mental spiral of like, shit, like, I can't believe I just took that amount of time. Like, that sucks. And you get into that mental beating yourself up of saying really intense shit about yourself. And you can go down that spiral. But what then happens is that spiral can cause you to just not have one intense day, but then another intense day, and then another intense day, another intense day. And before you know it, you are getting dragged towards hitting burnout. But if you remember this reframe, that it's an ongoing thing, you can then remember that each day is a new day to reset. You have an opportunity to change where you land on the spectrum. It's not just going to be a given that you're going to keep headed down towards hitting burnout. You can make a change based off of your actions. And that right there is a powerful reminder for yourself. So that is number 2 for the reframe. Now let's get into myth number 3 for the reframe, which again, for the reminder for the myth, burnout is a result of one area of your life. The reframe is remembering that burnout is interconnected with your life. So you got to remember that the way that burnout gets, how the burnout beast feeds on the day-to-day activities and actions that you take, is to remember that it's not just one area of life, which is, the one that comes up immediately is work, but it also is health. It's also your relationships, how you're communicating. So if you can remember that, you can also remember that the way you can make burnout extinct doesn't just have to be from work. It could actually be from all the other areas of life that then what happens out of a result of that is that you then don't feel burnout at work. So for example, let's say you are getting like 4 hours of sleep each night, and you are noticing that's happening over a few days. And it could be just because of the responsibilities that are coming in, things that are just happening in life. I mean, we're talking about, the responsibilities, obligations you have with family, with work. But that's a moment to remind yourself that you're hitting a red flag, which is chronic exhaustion. So it's in that moment where you may have to set a boundary. That could be in a relationship where you're setting a boundary of saying, hey, I can't handle these extra responsibilities because I need to go back and I need to make sure I get a few hours of sleep. So if it could be that, or with work, having to say, hey, I can't take on this extra project because right now, like that's going to cause me to feel overworked. And I don't think I'm going to do a good enough job with the other current projects that I have. So that's a moment to be able to reframe that, is remembering that if it's interconnected with all these other areas, I got to make sure I'm addressing all these other areas of life too. Moving on to myth number 4 for how we can reframe it, which is burnout happens super quick without you realizing it. What you can then remember is that burnout builds up gradually with warning signs along the way. It's those signposts, those red flags that are popping up, which again, for the 3 main ones, is chronic exhaustion, negativity in your work, and then terrible performance in your job or your career. So if you can recognize those personal experiences that come up, and I shared that in the last episode of like 5 personal experiences you can look out for. If you can recognize when these moments come up where you feel like you're headed towards chronic exhaustion, all of a sudden you can change directions based off of your behavior or based off of your actions. And from there, move towards making burnout extinct. Because again, if you haven't been getting your mo time in, your movement throughout the day, and you're feeling really tired and exhausted after the end of the day, that's a great opportunity then to change that action and make sure that you're getting your mo time in. That could be just a few minutes, 5 to 10 minutes of getting outside for a walk, or being able to just shake out the body and take a break from your work tasks. So from that, it's just small little actions you can take to recognize once you hit those signposts that it's a moment for you to change directions and head back towards making burnout extinct. Then number 5 for the myth. It's complicated to avoid burnout. This one is just remembering that avoiding burnout can be simple. It's figuring out those habits that you want to implement, the new habits that can help make sure that you're making burnout extinct. It goes back to the strategies, the plays in your Burnout-Proof playbook. The simplest way I can explain this is making sure you're doing more things more things overall that energize you rather than drain you. That's what can help determine to make sure that you are making burnout extinct and making that your home is that you're doing more that energizes you than drains you. It's the simplest way I can put it. And the way that you do more energizing activities is through your plays in your Burnout-Proof playbook. So there you go for the 5 common myths. Now it's going back to which one of these myths did you resonate with the most? Because that's going to be a great place to start for the reframe and to focus in on that reframe to get started in these next few days. And then from there, you can move on to the next one, and then the next myth, and then the next one. And then it's always coming back to that Burnout-Proof playbook. Being able to figure out your specific plays, which you can again go back to other episodes and be able to learn different plays to implement in your own Burnout-Proof playbook. But you absolutely have the capabilities to be able to do this. I know that these myths could be something that you've been experiencing for potentially years. And so remember to give yourself some grace for the emotions that can come up, with those feelings that come up, honor them, but then don't get stuck in them. Be able to move forward through that. And that's a realization that you have an opportunity here to reframe these myths. You got this. If you like this episode, please don't forget to rate this podcast to help get this message out of Make Burnout Extinct. And you can share what resonates with you from this episode by connecting with me on Instagram or LinkedIn. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. I don't take that for granted. Excited to reconnect again soon with you.